AI startup called Hume AI has just started turning some heads with a pretty impressive demo of some stunning new and potentially creepy AI technology. Now, this startup is co-founded by a former Google DeepMind researcher, and their core product is something called its Empathetic Voice Interface, or EVI. Evie can carry on a conversation with you simply by speaking and responding via voice chat. But that's not really what has everyone paying attention to this. When you converse with Evie, the system actually understands your emotions. So it can react to those emotions with language that addresses your needs in the tone that addresses your needs. So that means Evie can do things like understand your pitch, your tone, your facial expression in order to conduct a more emotionally intelligent conversation with you. So Hume AI said in an announcement, Evie has a number of unique empathetic capabilities. It responds with human-like tones of voice based on your expressions. It reacts to your expressions with language that addresses your needs and maximizes satisfaction. Evie knows when to speak because it uses your tone of voice for state-of-the-art end-of-turn detection. It stops when interrupted, but can always pick up where it left off. And it learns to make you happy by applying your reactions to self-improve over time. So the company released both a video demo and a self-serve one. You can go try the tool out for yourself. And at the same time, Hume AI also announced it had raised $50 million in Series B funding. So Paul, I played around with this a little bit and it seemed pretty impressive, but I can already hear the internet comments explode with some strong opinions on this type of technology. Like, did you find this cool, creepy, a little bit of both?
Uh, my first reaction was that I was kind of surprised this was the first real demo we're seeing of this. Like, it seemed like such an obvious thing that would come that when I first saw it, I was like, is this really the first time we're seeing this? Because this is, and we've talked about empathy on the show before. And my, my thought is that this is really interesting. It is definitely potentially creepy, but I think we have to take a step back and think about the role of empathy in like human communications. And years ago, when I was first starting to really think about the things that I thought remained uniquely human as AI became more intelligent, more advanced, I always had empathy on the list. And then there was a point a few years back where I realized that probably wasn't going to be the case. And we've talked about this, it was probably 20, 30 episodes ago. I don't remember what the tool was we were talking about at the time, but what I realized was that a lot of humans aren't very empathetic. Like they actually struggle to be empathetic. And um, so while it is sort of a unique human trait, there are many humans who don't have that trait, or it's not a very strong trait of theirs. But it's so important in communications and relationships to have empathy. And so what I realized was that AI may actually enhance human empathy by synthesizing it for people. So, like, if what I mean by that is if someone who isn't normally very empathetic and struggles to relate to and convey with other people actually writes something and then tells the AI, make this more empathetic, the AI can do that every time. Well, that's what it was. We were talking episode last year about a test that was run for doctors
Mm.
where the patients found the communications with the AI more empathetic. And what you realize is like, wow, okay, a lot of doctors probably struggle to make those connections with people and to be empathetic toward them. So while I think it's a little bit unnerving that technology like this exists, I do choose to kind of see the positive side in that I think more empathy in society is always good. And if some people need to rely on their AI assistant to help them be that way, so be it. I think that can be a good thing. I also see it having a lot of positive impact within business. So, I always want to try and like connect this back to how do we use this in business. So if you think about like HR, when you have to communicate bad news from an HR perspective, there's a lot of people probably aren't very good at that. So to be able to put that through an empathy layer, basically, always making things more empathetic. If you think about customer service, and understanding, what people are going through, Think about patient communications we just talked about, marketing, sales, like all of these things. Empathy is able to enrich the communications and the relationships that occur. And so I think what happens is this is, again, since it's not prevalent already, I can't imagine a near future, 1 to 2 years out, where every AI chatbot doesn't have an empathy component to it. Um, Both be understanding your emotions as you're communicating with it, but then able to communicate back to you in an empathetic way. So I think this is probably the very early. You could certainly imagine Surrey, by fall of this year,
Mm.
actually understanding the tone of your voice and not just communicating to all of us in the same way, but communicating based on how you're feeling, how you're acting, how your voice sounds. And certainly we've talked a lot in the last few episodes about robotics. You could imagine, humanoid robots going to a whole different level if, they're embodied with not only intelligence but empathy. So I do still feel that empathy is a uniquely human trait. The machine doesn't actually feel anything, but it can synthesize empathy at a superhuman level. And that's a weird thing to wrap our minds around, but I think that's just a fact. Like it's going to be able to be empathetic or synthesize empathy in all modalities, and that's going to be something we're just going to have to adjust to as society. But again, I think I generally choose to view this as a positive if it's applied in the right ways.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's worth mentioning to your point about use cases and seeing this stuff everywhere that while you can play with the personal AI assistant on their website, the big focus here is the EV API itself, which they're encouraging others to build on top and bake into basically any application you could think of. So that can be very positive from that sense as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Mike, and also a reminder, like, you don't have to wait for access to this to use AI tools to help you be more empathetic. You can
Mhm.
use it in ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever you're using. When you're writing something, ask it to make it more empathetic, and it'll do it. Like, you can do this right now. I've seen people use this for, like, customer communications and patient communication. So, yeah, use the AI to help you with empathy. Like I think that's a valuable use case for it. Like I said at the start, we need more empathy in society. And if we learn to be more empathetic through the machines, great.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because I find myself more and more using it in that respect of saying, well, now I've got this 24/7 assistant that's not going to judge me, that I'm not going to feel embarrassed talking to somebody about, and that has all these capabilities. I find myself saying, well, what do you think of the tone of this email or
Yeah.
this communication? I can sometimes be a little too blunt when I don't mean to be. Like, how might this be perceived? Or how could I better understand what this person might be going through?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to assume these models in the not too distant future will automatically detect that sort of thing.
Mm.
So, let's say you go in and you need to, lay some people off and you draft a letter in ChatGPT where you're doing layoffs. Um, it would detect that there's a negative connotation to the content and recommend a more empathetic approach to it. That's the kind of thing, again, I think as these things become true assistants and like you're saying, like always there 24/7, it's not just reactive to us asking for more empathy, but it's actually proactive by assessing what's being created and how the tools are being used and actually bringing that kind of value to it, saying, hey, based on the tone of this, you may want to consider it to be more empathetic. Here's a version of it that you could, take a look at. And I think that's, again, like the sort of the positive outlook of what co-pilots or assistants can be is that they're proactive in helping us be better professionals also.